All right, so I'm excited to finally get online to start telling my story. Um, I've been feeling this call to get into my spiritual experience over the last 10 years that I've had, and mainly my spiritual awakening that I experienced. And it's an interesting time right now with the virus that is spreading and um, causing a lot of fear and a lot of confusion with people, and understandably so, including myself. It's quite beyond our understanding in a lot of ways, but I've been getting closer to myself spiritually and listening to whatever calls that need to be answered to, calls from within. And something that I've most recently been experiencing is the call to tell my story, my spiritual awakening. And I just burned some sage to kind of clear the energy in the space, in the room. I wanted to, so I'll start by introducing myself for those who don't know who I am. My name is Simbala Dazil. I am, I would consider myself a light worker in training. I feel that I've positioned myself to receive whatever gifts or whatever language, whatever tools that I need to use to navigate this world in a different way, in a way that is less three-dimensional and more multi-dimensional, if that even makes sense to anyone. Um, so in that, I'm trying to let go of fear and open myself up to messages that may come through to me that are meant to be shared with anyone who's ready to receive them. That is actually one of my, how do I say, really, like power words, or I can't think of the phrase right now, but that's one of my favorite phrases right now is I am ready to receive. So in saying that phrase, it's time for me to also give. So I will be sharing my story. I wanted to start from the beginning, like, tell the whole story, but I thought that to be kind of wasteful, especially considering where people are at right now and how folks might be a little bit distressed and confused. So I can start with when I was awakened. So, this story, I also want to get into the fact that storytelling is such a lost art. And as I get to know myself further and deeper, I begin to realize that that is one of my gifts and one of my talents is storytelling. And no, I'm not talking about lying or fibbing or not even exaggerating, but knowing how to tell a story and knowing how to engage the listener, knowing how to animate the imagination of your perceivers. So that is also one of my purposes of sharing my story. I could have wrote a book, I was inspired by these other YouTubers. They call themselves Twin Flames, Lee and Sherry. It's how I found them randomly. I don't even know how I came across their videos, but I found their first video or one of their first ones, and then just it played it. I have my YouTube set up on autoplay, and it just started playing their videos in sequence, and they started, it was like their story on how they met, and like their whole connection, their twin flame connection. And it blew my mind because it was so raw. There was no, and it's such a long story, so it's like episodes, you're like always waiting for the next episode. So I really liked that. So that inspired me. So I figured I would do like a similar style, as far as just get into it and give, maybe 15 minutes at a time of my story, which I haven't even started yet. But yeah, I'm really excited to finally put myself out into the world in this way. And I'm hoping by sharing my story that this will begin a dialogue with folks, to feel more comfortable talking about the occult or the hidden, or things that don't seem tangible in this reality, so things that make us seem like we're losing our minds, So that's kind of the stuff that I'm going to get into with my experiences. I've had periods of time where I thought I was losing it, like I thought I was going berserk, and I thank God, I thank the heavens, I thank everything on this planet that I was around, the people that I was around when I was going through what I was going through, because had I been around the wrong people, I would have found myself maybe in a mental institution, and it could have sent me further back or deeper into the darkness, so deep that I may not have ever been able to emerge from it. So I know there are forces outside of myself and beyond me that have guided me to this point, and that have also protected me to not experience things worse than I have to begin with. So on that note, I will get into the storytelling. So I guess I need to give this a title as I pause again. I was thinking about it earlier, what I want to call this. And the first thing that's coming to mind right now is like my awakening into the abyss. But even better, I would say my awakening into the void. So that will be the title, Awakening into the Void, by Simbala. So, to begin with, at this time in my life, I was living in San Diego. I am a California girl. I grew up initially in San Francisco, spent my primary years there up until about 12 or 13, and then moved around a lot from there. So moved to like Northern California, spent some time in Oregon with family, here, there, then spent high school years in a small town in California. So considering I grew up in the city, by the time I was of a decent age to kind of do my own thing, like my early 20s, I decided to take it upon myself to move to San Diego and start anew there. And I was alone during this time. I had plans to move with a friend, but those fell through, and so I was on my own. And so that was kind of, being on my own kind of opened me up to having to get to know myself. I mean, I didn't know that yet, but I think I was starting to see it, but deny it. I was always good at connecting with people and making it friends immediately, friends. So So that was my thing. I went out there, got a job, and just started, living my life and on the grind. And I didn't realize I was running away from myself. I didn't realize, I had left a lot of things behind, some poor actions on my behalf. Um, just more than anything, I left behind just such a degree of any amount of awareness I had of myself. It was deteriorating as time moved on, and San Diego furthered that deterioration because Southern California, and specifically that city, for me personally, is very superficial. And what I noticed is that a lot of people who move to that area kind of conform to the lifestyle of, very focused on outward appearances. And it's just different. It's just different. I'm from the Bay Area, Southern California and Bay Area are very different. So I was fighting it, but I was still kind of acclimating to the new climate of that, region. So already my sense of self was deteriorating, but then moving to San Diego was really kind of just finishing the job. And to be away from family or any kind of sense of, structure of who I thought I was completely gone. So I was just, a person being with no sense of self in a new city, with no anchor of, close friends or family nearby to keep me grounded in any way. And so I continued my lifestyle that I had before moving there, which was partying, drinking, frivolous relationships, promiscuity, hookup culture, all of that. I continued that lifestyle. And I hit a wall at a certain point. I was tired of the frivolous relationships, tired of being with unavailable men, and I had been severely heartbroken at 19 or 20, and that just kind of, it rocked my world so much that it kind of changed the trajectory of my life and my focus. That it just like anything that I had focused for just kind of vanished after that heartbreak. And also any care and consideration that I had for myself and then for other people around me was gone after that relationship. So I carried that energy with me, that brokenness with me to San Diego. And I reached a point, as I said, that the frivolous relationships and the partying and all that stuff, I was getting tired of it. It was wearing on me. And I happened to meet someone in class. I was going to community college at the time. And I met a young gentleman who was my age. And we clicked, we vibed. Like it was interesting, He was Caucasian guy, which I wasn't really used to. I was kind of put off by that at first. I was like, not really my type, but you can't really judge who you're going to be into based on any of that kind of stuff, So I opened my heart. At the time, I didn't even know that's what I was doing. But that's what happened. And um, that was the beginning of feelings that I never consciously felt before. So I had been on this course of just being in all these like negative interactions, the partying, all this stuff. Even if it was fun or felt like fun, there was still just kind of a negative, something negative attached to that. So I couldn't really um, I couldn't, I just couldn't see forward, from those experiences. So then when I met this person, it kind of like pulled me out of that loop of what it felt like a downward spiral. It's like I was, yeah, spiraling out of control is a good way to put it. And so when I met this guy who seemed relatively stable from what I was used to, it was nice. He was available. He was, all the things that I wasn't experiencing in my romantic relationships. And so we began a relationship together, and it was for the first time very positive. He was very giving towards me and very affectionate, just all these things I'd never experienced, especially with a man. And it was like changing me, and I didn't know how to respond to it. And all of, who I was, or who I was in lacking, was showing up. So it's just kind of this shell of a person who had no emotions, and who, was very superficial and very surface, and only cared about frivolous things like partying and drinking. Like, that's the only person that was able to show up in this relationship, or in this what could have been a positive exchange, but I didn't even know what that looked like, to have a positive exchange with somebody, and what even a relationship was in the positive sense, and a romantic relationship specifically, like what is that even in the positive sense. So even though it felt good and I was happy to be in it, it's like I did not know how to actively participate in it, to be sure that the other person was receiving what they needed from me. I was not present, and I was young. I didn't know. I had no experience in relationships, and I had no experience in exposing myself. I didn't even know who I was. So this relationship with this man, even if it was short lived, it woke up a lot in me. And because I wasn't able to mirror back to him what he was mirroring to me, it wasn't good enough for him. He was a very well-adjusted person where I was not. And I felt him pull away. And as I felt him pulling away, I began to kind of unravel in some ways. Like, I had tied my identity to this person, and without even realizing that my loss of identity came way before this person. He just allowed me to feel feelings that I've never been allowed to feel before, because of a lack of love for myself. And when he finally did decide to end things, that started a really intense journey for me, and it was the beginning of some of the most intense experiences I've ever had in my life. And on that note, to be continued.